All right.
Do people see us places?
Not on YouTube.
Let me refresh.
Oh, hey, there we
Oh,
are.
all right. I think we managed to unbreak things.
Too
Maybe.
many ba buttons.
Uh,
There we go.
Okay, okay, maybe. To be determined. Tune in next time to see if Goku will defeat. Just kidding. All right, so for real this time, hello and welcome to Geek on My Sleeve. For those new to the channel, I'm Peter, here with my co host in the top left hand corner, Carl, and a good friend of ours, John, in the top right hand corner. We are going to be doing, or on Geek on My Sleeve, we do spoiler free book reviews and live book discussions like this one. Thank you for joining us for Geek Out session number 15. We are going to be doing a book discussion of Dungeon Calamity Book 3 in the Divine Dungeon series. Spoiler warnings ahead. If you intend to read the book spoiler free, we suggest you stop. Check out our spoiler free book reviews. Just kidding, we don't have this one up yet. Soon we'll have a spoiler free one for this one. We keep all of our geek outs that we do, all of our live streams that we do archived. So if you need to come back, no worries. You can check this out later.
yeah. Yeah. So, hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us. We are constantly trying to change things up and break things, not just through technical means, but also with the way we do this channel, the way we do these Geek Out sessions. Right now, we live in an interesting time where, due to the pandemic, a lot of us are in isolation. So we're going to, do what we can to keep things casual today, ease into the book discussion. I want to do a special thanks to all those essential workers out there right now, keeping society running while a good portion of areas around the world are in different degrees of shelter in place. So, yeah, just want to start out visiting with everybody. Thanks, John, for being one of those essential workers. How you doing today, man?
Not too bad. Today was a very slow, methodical day where things just got done super fast and
Good.
just trying to keep up on making sure everything stays clean.
Right.
It's always a challenge with
How
people. So
I love
I
the
don't
paradox of that sentence. It was so slow because things went so fast.
yeah, yeah. See what
Sorry,
you did there.
continue.
you never know. Never
Yeah.
know.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't want to dwell on it too much, but I'm kind of curious when you're out and about, how is like traffic and everything? Does it just seem a lot slower?
It is. Unfortunately, traffic lights are still the same. So if you hit a red light, you get all of them.
uh
But aside from that, there's hardly anyone out there. If anything, it'd be like two, three cars at
wow.
max that I see. And it's just like I go to the area that I need to go, get changed, then I go, up to the kitchen, make sure everything's going well, and then I just start going. Like everyone's usually already there, so it's
Cool.
just I don't really see a whole lot of people out and about.
Yeah. A lot of places are shut down. I can't think of anybody that's not impacted right now. I know it's certainly impacted my life with just kids being home. Um, and just, yeah, everything else, a lot of new changes. So, yeah, we're going to keep things casual. Visit. This is book 3 of the series. So we're going to spend some time setting the scene up for book 3, revisiting some of our favorite moments in book 1 and book 2, If you read it, please contribute in the comments and chat. Your favorite moments from book 1 and 2. We're going to try to keep it spoiler free going forward, though.
So no book 4.
So no book 4, and that's sometimes hard for people. I know it is for myself. One of the things I enjoy about our dynamics for this Geek Out series right here is both Peter and myself have read this series multiple times, all the way through all 5 books of the Divine Dungeon. John, this is your first time with it, right?
Correct.
So
and I just finished the book not even earlier today, so
so it is fresh. The emotions are still very, very fresh and new for this book, where, at least for myself, I'm revisiting it and I'm seeing new things in the story. I've probably been through this book, I don't know, 6 or 7 times now, maybe more. And again, spoiler 3 warning, book 3 warning, just the loop on this, the time loop on this. Wow, so much more makes sense when you go back through the series. You get to see a little bit more of the foreshadowing and just some of those other little details. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to talking about the Divine Dungeon series with you guys. We're going to do what we can to keep this family friendly, but
Speaking of which,
Oh,
Grandma says, "Hi, John. Missed you last week."
Oh,
speaking of
hi,
which,
hi, Grandma.
So yeah, we want to keep this as PG as possible. There is some adult humor in the book. I don't think it's too overly graphic, but you have been warned.
Yeah,
And
there's
I-
plenty of
I-
some graphic scenes in this book.
And kind of to
All of
start
them.
off,
Oh, go ahead.
kind of to start off our book 1 revision, there's a lot of quotes, and Dakota does kind of like a kick in the butt and then like a stop and smell the roses. Favorite quote for book 1: "Don't be sorry, be smart. If you die, so do I. We need you to be the smartest dungeon that exists because we need each other." Kind of a kick in the butt when Cal or Danny's training Cal how to fix the facets in his core.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. All the feels, all the feels. Um, yeah.
Which
Danny,
kind of leads us into beginning of book 1 for Cal's a baby, or Cal gets killed by the necromancers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, might as well. You got to talk a little bit about it since we've been through book 3, but that time loop there, uh, Cal starting off as a baby dungeon and getting killed by the necromancers all the way to where we're at the end of book 3 is just an incredible journey. Book 1, I feel, well, I think we talked about this a little bit, Pete. Book 1 and book 2 kind of had a different feel than book 3, right?
Yeah. And part of it I felt was a great writing style esque thing, because book 1 and 2, it makes sense. And then book 3, it is Calamity and he is, potentially going mad. So little nuances I noticed. 1 and 2, you had little time hops where you would view it from the dungeon or Cal's perspective, and then you would view it from the adventurer or Dale's perspective, and there wasn't a whole lot of hop. But then in 3, kind of a nod to the madness, it is hard to distinguish between what is from this viewpoint and if there is a time hop backwards.
Right.
So yeah.
It definitely caught me. It took me a few minutes to after reading, or in this case listening to the Audible. It took me a little bit to realize, wait, what just happened here? What is going on? So I had to rewind it.
Yeah.
I'm
yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, that makes sense.
Yes.
And then it clicks. It's oh.
Yes.
It time skipped, and I'm back at the beginning. Oh, okay, all right. Now it's starting to make sense. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And then also just like the ending. Oh my, the ending just makes you want to re-listen to it anyway because now you have that full new perspective on everything.
Yep.
So
I what got me at the very end was the fact that he, the book's called Calamity, and he's like, "Oh, Calamity." I'm
oh
like,
man, the
"Oh my
word
god."
puns.
Yeah.
He had to throw that in there.
He,
And on
he
that
is a
note,
narcissist.
oh, on that
No.
note, with the whole word stuff, the last one I had all of them all lined up. The only one that sticks out to me as soon as Queen Marie comes back and she's in her form-fitting mithril armor and all the dwarfs are goggling over it or whatnot, he says,
Mhm.
"Oh hey, Coda, come over here," and then he ends up saying, "Duh, Coda," and he just throws the little, title in it. That was a big one that stuck out to me for the word puns.
There were quite a few, and I
Yeah, I
think
didn't.
Hans had a lot of them. Like a lot of the puns came from him.
Yeah,
Uh, we spent a lot of time with Hans, but there are several different character arcs where it's nonstop in book three. He definitely commits to the puns more and more each book, and yeah,
He's
yeah,
he's essentially a ball of sarcasm, and
uh, that's
like
right.
it. He has some serious moments, but for like 90% of the time, it's just puns
Mm-hmm.
and him flirting with Rose.
That too. But back to setting up the groundwork. Went down the rabbit hole there, eager to talk about book three.
Oh yeah.
Uh, book one. Let's get some of our favorite parts of book one because, yeah, we start off as a baby level G dungeon, and it's not until he interacts with Cantor, which we learn more about in book three, the flying dungeon, and he gets Danny, which kind of helps him go through that training stage. And wow, I know in the previous Geek Out sessions we just talked about the scaling, how quickly they progress through the ranks, and yeah, eating moss to book three. Same with
Flying
Dale.
Island
Say what?
or eating moss to Flying Mountain.
To Flying Mountain, right? Just the progression in the story, it gives you that epic fantasy feel. Uh, Dale, as far as like our typical um, adventurer, starts out as a fishy, right? Uh, the mountain was essentially only good for raising sheep. They couldn't really do any sort of agriculture. So a group of these farmers discovered Cal, and yeah,
He's the only one who survives.
he's the only one who survives. Um,
So for
and
Dale, going from sheep herder to, paradox of actually being the mountain.
right, right, uh, yeah, yeah, and then I don't know, just the progression. How much Cal and Dale lucked out getting set up in that first book to where they are in book three, like the Silverwood tree. Danny discovering that early on, how crucial that the Silverwood tree was later on, and we get to
Oh yeah.
learn a little bit more about how it helps dungeons in the mage ranks. We finally get that question answered in book three.
Yeah, or at
Uh,
least hinted at.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know, I feel as though book one was definitely the, like, if I had to compare it to anything, it was watching Cal upgrade from like kindergarten all the way up through high school. That's how that book felt to me. Like just the learning progression and how
Yeah,
quick he went through each level and understanding how things worked.
he definitely jumped, and we now understand why he was so unique, right? Because all through book one, we keep hearing about how long it takes the dungeons to progress and how Danny is constantly surprised by him in the beginning is because of that full loop. right? He isn't just a beast core like Cantor was, where it took him, I forget, like 50, 60 years. Um, as always, please correct us if we misquote the book. They're not as fresh in our memory. But yeah, it took him 50, 60 years just to learn how to talk. And Cal is able to converse with Danny from day one. And then, yeah, she goes from uh,
Well,
very basic concepts. Oh, go ahead.
that's something they tie together really well because in book one, we kind of get the hint or the nod to, oh, he was human and brought into a soul gem, or maybe by two, it's a soul gem bit. And then
Mm-hmm.
at book three, they're just slowly adding layers to where now we understand who and what and where, Cal was actually Dale.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we like the first book. You definitely you find out a little bit about Cal. You're like, all right, this is where like he for some reason he hates necromancers. He's
Right.
starting out fresh. Like
Right.
obviously something happened in the past that was like a blank, but you kind of as the book continues through the first one into the second one, you kind of forget about that part. And so you're just like, all right, he started here and we're just going to keep going and see where we go. At the end of book three, like you definitely, like now everything makes sense. And both Dale and Cal as a full fledged, like, everything you need to know about them right now. And everything from going on to book four and onward is just going
Mm-hmm.
to be brand new content for both of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And just how much better they are off for it. You bring up a couple good points there. The necromancer, he really doesn't want to have anything to do with that. Is very adamant about it in the beginning with Danny, and we get a little bit of the necromancer story arcs in book one and two. Right, there's a bit of a prologue, an epilogue, I believe, in both of the books, and this is the first time we don't have it with it in book three. We don't have a prologue of the necromancers. They're just such a big part of the story um, in book three. So yeah, uh, a lot of interesting stuff happens in book one. What are some of your guys' favorite parts? I know we all agreed that Father Richard, I think, was the MVP, our favorite for book one, right?
Yeah.
Was that
A unanimous,
right?
yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
for how much we saw and knew. Mother of Pearl. Anyway, sorry. So it looks like the Facebook people are commenting and not popping up in our restream chat.
Mm,
Sorry for the inconvenience. Still breaking things. If you go to the YouTube link, which I tried to post in the comments there, apparently Restream likes YouTube more. Sorry for
mm,
the inconvenience. Thank you for joining us. That is how you can join in. Sorry, where were we? We were. Oh,
uh,
Father
Father
Richard, as far as book one, I enjoyed him. Kind of rehash it, mainly because, like, he was a high ranking individual and
mhm,
you get to see him treat Dale nicely. You get to see his difference in talking to Frank, where he's trying to browbeat him, push him around, to
mhm,
when Hans rolls up and he's like, "Hey, tell Frank that this is the best place to do it." And Hans gets his giggles and tells Frank, and
right.
then he's like, "There you have it." And then it comes back to Dale, and it's like, "Hey, okay, so I really need this." He's not trying to be mean like James
Mhm,
was, but yeah, he just had the best. I'm a high ranker and I'm still a human, not a overpowered rock.
right. He he does take advantage of him at times though, and we do see that a lot
Yeah,
with Dale in the first couple books, right? As much as the later council, including Father Richard, are looking out for his best interest, he ends up building what three times as big of a church, thereby dungeon entrance, and granted, it paid out in dividends time and time again throughout the books, right?
Yeah,
With the
yeah.
dungeon
There's a bit of back
breakouts
and
and
forth. Father
Mhm.
Richard takes advantage of Dale at the beginning, but then he ends up getting a council room, and he ends up getting room and board initially until
Mhm.
after the oh end of two, the war, because
Right,
then a lot of the space is taken up by the infected or the wounded.
I think
right.
what's that called? Like the Screaming War or something like that.
I
Uh,
forget the
I
wording.
think it's the Wailing War. And
Whaling. There
again,
we go. Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
toss it in the comments if we ever misquote or misspeak, or if you have a differing opinion on the book. Um, yeah, the Wailing War was the big climax at the end of book 2, and we hear about it a lot more, or get reference to as far as where we are in the timeline in book 3. Um, but yeah, and then we get introduced to Dale's party towards the end of book 1.
Yep.
The big climax for that there was the distortion cat, right?
Yep.
Nope. Main character dies. Story's over.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's the
or
main part.
distortion cat.
Is that this book, or are you talking about book 1?
That's every book. Okay. Book 2 is main character
Okay.
dies inside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair point. Fair point.
Time loops on time loops on time
Yeah.
loops. Yeah. Book 1 to book 3 started from the bottom. Now we're here. Started out as a fishy. Dale gets decked out in that crazy armor.
As a
And
D level
yep.
essence gatherer. It's like
Oh,
being level 15 or 20, and you're like, all right, I'm ready for a raid.
No, you're not. No, you're not. First couple books, and again, thank goodness they have Hans. Uh, you really get to see the power level difference each rank you go up, and that really crystallizes in book 3. We're dealing with adventurers FDC rank. I believe it's like Craig and Hans, the two noteworthy people from his main party, are in the C rank, and then you have Father Richard, who's in the A rank, and just the difference in power level is incredible.
There's a quote, or not quote. There's a thing that I read in book 3 comparing power levels. One A rank mage has the same power, or can deal with 10 B rank mages.
Mm,
So
yeah.
that can only say something for C rank. How many C ranks does it take to take on an A rank?
pretty much multiply by 10 each level, and that's crazy. Um, because in the book, at least in the appendix, I think it goes all the way up to like triple S and heavily, then godly and whatnot.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting. Don't want to get too much into book 3, but we get to see a lot more of that. Uh, book 1, it really just starts out with Cal and Dale and the mountain and kind of focus on that, and then we slowly progress into book 3 where it's just freaking huge. Um, let's
On
see.
to segue to book 2.
Yeah, unless you guys had anything else you felt worth mentioning in book 1.
I'm sure we'll reference stuff back to it, but I think we got a good foundation.
Sure.
Yeah.
Book 2, characters not dead, main characters not dead. We get a little bit of the necromancer story arc in the background, and yeah, where do we go from there?
I think we really just see Dale improve. So the first book was Cal really like improving along with Dale in some regard, just like figuring out what's going on. Cal was the one that really improved throughout book 1. I think book 2, Dale was the person who came out on top in terms of improvement, like how much stuff he's doing to improve to be at the position that he's wanting to be at.
book one, he just focuses on like leveling up as an adventurer, right?
Yeah.
Learning to fix his center, his cultivation, eliminate corruption. And then book two, he realizes, oh, hey, this isn't just a tiny little farming community anymore. This is becoming a busy, bustling place. Um, I need to start stepping up.
Yeah, and then book two, it's a lot of like intense dungeon divey stuff. From book one, we end up with 2 floors of the dungeon. Book two, we end up with 4 floors of the dungeon, and you really get to see, or is it 4? Or is it 3?
No, it was 4.
It's 4. Anyway, 4, and anyway, we really get to see Danny. Sorry, I'm the paradox of flipping through all the books. We really get to see Danny
so many times
take a leading role, and that was one thing I missed in 3. Plays a critical role in 3, but not the same. Not as her active role jumping in, and we get to see that glimpse of Cal being like, wow, I have a serious hole or flaw because I don't have a main boss.
Yeah.
4-3.
Yeah. So, quick pause. Again, thank you everybody for being so patient with us as we work through some of the technical challenges. Appreciate everyone showing up for the live stream and those watching afterwards. Continue the conversation in the comments below. Likes, dislikes of the Divine Dungeon series. If you haven't already, please hit the like button. That helps us out a lot, and it's free. And yeah,
social distancing at its finest.
Yes, thank you for social distancing with us here at Geek on My Sleeve, where we enjoy talking about books, exploring other realities that aren't our own, traveling to distant lands, all from the confines of our own home.
The chair of our computers.
Yes. Yes.
Hey, I mean, this is the future. Everyone's switching to doing stuff like this, but oh man, I can't wait.
Yes.
I'm waiting for the time where I feel it coming up. Well, I just really want to do just straight up dive into Sword Art Online kind of deal.
Virtual reality is
I will
it's
gladly.
coming.
It's like, see ya, real life. I'm going online.
Yeah. Man, I forget the movie, and I'm so bad with this, but there's a movie where people essentially jump into dive capsules, and then they have a avatar or whatever who looks exactly like them, and they go out in the real world and they do stuff. So I think.
Oh, I know. I know what movie you're talking about, but I don't remember the name either.
So thank you for creating the movie. Sorry,
I
can't remember it. But yeah, I think that would be a cool step because currently for my line of work, I physically have to be there or I'm going to lose my job due to robots. I don't quite want to lose my job to robots.
Robots are going to come up. Warehouse, like they're going to take over hospitals first. I think they're going into the healthcare industry. Well, let's backtrack a little bit more. First off, they're going into the military. We already know robots are doing a lot of stuff there.
Yeah.
Then I think they're going to go into healthcare, followed closely by warehouse stuff, which I mean, it already kind of is for some companies, but like for everything or most things, I think that's going to be the third thing, and then following that will be food service, retail, like the basic jobs.
Yeah.
From there, it could just keep expanding out. Like I don't know how far away we are, but I think that's like the tiers that we're going to be going into. Like you can see videos of like people making robots and see how far they're coming along. Like just even a few years, like seeing the robotics of like just the robots like moving side to side and like actually doing stuff.
Yeah.
I think cool.
I've seen a couple cool ones, but the idea has been planted for a while because you've got The Matrix, where, they're living in a virtual world. Granted, that's a different
Yeah.
spin, but I've seen some pretty intense, um, I guess you would call it haptic gear or whatever, where the guy literally has like a 360 treadmill, hydraulic arms and whatnot, and wears like a harness. And then, like, as he moves and as he does his controller stuff, it actually like moves and incorporates in. Or that's, it was a custom build thing. Anyway, uh, yeah. Dive capsules, RS.
But I feel
They're
it
they're coming.
in order to like dive into like you know robots or whatever, they're gonna have to implant some kind of chip or something into like our neck, our nervous system, like so they can
I,
like jack in.
I
Sci-fi
don't.
has the answers for that.
I don't know how I feel about that because brain waves
How else?
are electrical impulses or electrical from this to this connecting creates whatever, and you there has to be a way to like amplify it, because how is my phone, computer, whatever, jumping all the way to a satellite and coming back? I know it's different kind of waves, but I think there might be like a field or something we can do to interpret or incorporate it. I think there's just too much interference with every other part or section that we're utilizing. We need to isolate it and amplify it.
All right. I gotta pull us back. I
Okay,
gotta pull us
sorry.
back. I enjoy Gamelit RPG because they do answer a lot of those questions in different ways. We've already covered it in Life Reset, one of our previous Geek Out streams. Um, I think Dakota Kraut has written some stuff dealing with that as well. The whole Completionist Chronicles is pretty much the dive capsule um, VR, and it's coming. I would put money down in our lifetime. Uh, so yeah, book 2
Book
of the
two.
Divine Dungeon series. We really get to spend a lot more time with their party, right?
Yeah.
Some character
Mhm.
character not creation
Development.
development. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of the book is built around that like camaraderie between Dale, Rose, Adam, Tom, and Hans, and you get to see those relationships develop, the bonding as they risk their lives every day and work together to try to better themselves. Um, they start off, well, Dale and Hans were in that first group. So they had a pre existing relationship, and Hans really does a good job stepping in as a friend and mentor to Dale. And he certainly wouldn't be where he is without Hans constantly there to give him a little nudge when he needs to. And then, yeah, book 2, they all just grow as a unit, right? Focus on moving together, doing things together. Hans also takes on the mentorship of Tom. Adam goes to train with Father Richard, who I believe we get to see Father Richard's mentor in book 3.
Yeah,
Uh,
which it was hard for me to notice at first because it's just a subtle snippet. Because
mhm.
when Dale is, or no, I think Hans is like, oh, hey, you've got Father Richard to go with. And he's like, Father Richard, Richard Demon Bane, blah, 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 who was trained
Right.
by Neil, uh,
Oh,
Neil
I'm gonna butcher it.
Nelson.
no,
Nolson.
yeah,
Yeah.
Neil.
Good
No,
job, John.
anyway, so there's a snippet in 2 where Adam gets or starts to get trained by him, and then it doesn't all loop back until Adam says the same thing. He's like, I know who that is. We got a
Hmm.
GTFO. You know.
Right.
Uh, so
It's
Well, we also got introduced into not only the party, but also like a lot of the different races. You got introduced
mhm,
into book 2, and you got to interact with them as well.
yeah,
right. You get more of the bigger world. Book 1 very much to stay on the mountain. I think our point of view moves off once, where Dale's mind gets blown over a sewage system in the
Yeah.
main city, and then just all the comedic fun that comes from him visiting the restaurant, the Pleasure House, on the way back. And then in book 2, thanks to all his training and these memory stones, he now has a good grasp of politics and the nuances between all these different factions, and we get introduced to these different factions. And yeah, we get the dwarves that come in, I believe, in book 2 and build a wall named Cliff.
Yep.
And the dark elves, the moon elves that come in book 2. In book 3, we really get to see how crucial Dale was to them. Like, we knew, but wow. Yeah.
Then we also get to see, Dani take that different role from kind of just a mentor guiding to active, and she is the floor boss for 3. She also jumps into Snowball for 3 and 4.
You mean floors? Wait, what?
She is in Snowball while Snowball is floor 3. Goblins enter. Right. Yes, cats get moved to 4. Then she's also the floor boss for 3. Yeah.
Well, wasn't it decided that she was just going to do 3? And I do remember that she went and ended up becoming Snowball, but they ended up letting Snowball do its own thing because of its natural predatory type senses.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
She has a moment where the nobles come through and she jumps into multiple different cats, but then she says, hey, Snowball's better than I'm going to be doing its own stuff. Yeah, right. Yeah. And then we end book 2 with the Wailing Wars. Something so simplistic, and dang it, Nick, why did you have to do these things?
Yes.
Essentially completely topples a nation, and now we've got all the infected on our doorstep coming back through the dungeon, or to the dungeon.
Which puts on an onset of a massive battle that we get to see. Like we really got to see, upgrades from F and the D ranks, see a little bit of C. But now, with this war going on, we can see B and A going on, and there's so much more to realize when dealing with mages.
Yes. They tease it in book 1, just kind of the difference with mages and how they view the world and how they're pretty much indestructible, right? With that layer of mana constantly covering their bodies.
And the whole reset, because even if you destroy or mess up your body, as soon as you become a mage, everything gets reset with the mana.
Yeah. It's a fun world, and Dakota Kraut has done a good job going through and really working out the details and the game mechanics of the lit RPG side of this. And it's a lot of fun to work its way through the series. The climax in book 2 with the Wailing War was incredible. The action there, we had all these feels from Cal and Dani and their bond through book 2, and we get towards the top of that high at the end of this battle, and you think everything's done, and like you said, Nick the Collector steals her, and yeah,
makes you want to go out and just scream, go into the freezer and scream.
Right. You feel for him. And at the end of book 2, you're kind of wondering what is the impact of this, because the bond between the Wisp and the Dungeon Core is so sacred, which kind of leads us into book 3. I wanted to spend some time visiting some of our favorite scenes and quotes. Give you guys a chance to share some of your favorite moments from book 2 before we jump into book 3.
I guess yes, share your favorite moments and quotes 1 and 2. There's a lot here. Sorry for how bad this comes out. I talked about book 1 and I missed my segue for leading into other stuff, but book 1, Danny and Cal. Danny is teaching Cal how to refine himself and make a stronger core. Danny,
Mm-hmm.
quote, don't be sorry, be smart. If you die, so do I. We need you to be the smartest dungeon that exists because we need each other. And so I love how he always has like a subtle, here's what we're doing, slow intro, get the grasp of the
Mm-hmm.
world. But then he always adds a like kick in the butt, like, hey, do better. And then towards the end of the book, my favorite quote is when Cal creates the glass looking up and he can see the stars. And essentially, it says, wow, that's so beautiful. I can't believe people go up and see them every night. That's Cal. Danny says, most people don't bother. Cal's like, why is that? And then Danny, most people tend to overlook, or hold on, most people tend to overlook at or think about things that have value to them at the moment. They look so hard at what they want that they drop out the beautiful things that could give them hope or allow them to look beyond their small lives. They lose sight of living, trying to get to their next goal, the next important thing. They forget that everything is important, that the little moments of happiness add up, overwhelm the great few larger moments, like making a friend smile or making it to the 280th page of a book. Well, nod. Uh, Sometimes it isn't about finishing your objective, it's about enjoying yourself on the way there. That's why I love, or that's, okay, yeah. That part isn't so important. But then towards the end of the book, as you know, things are getting serious and everything else is going on, we get that little nod to stop and smell the roses.
It's
Sorry. Oh,
Oh, I was just going to say, like, there's a lot of good messages that I took away from this book. It's always fun to kind of go and escape into a book and, you know, escape reality for a minute. But just the positive takeaways of like, work hard, continue to do better, remember what's important in life. Through Cal and Danny, remember who's important in your life. I mean, it's a good takeaway anytime, but especially considering what we're going through with the current pandemic and whatnot. But yeah, sorry, went down the rabbit hole.
it's all good. I think I'm gonna just kind of abridge, not exactly
Sure.
quote. For book 2, the kick in the butt is where Dale has kind of been mopey. He died, and Hans gives him the kick in the butt where he's like, "Oh, really? I've heard rumors that you've been all weepy and mopey. I've been following you to check it out, and it's true." And then, the kick in the butt is you need to start going to council sessions, stop letting people you barely know make all your life decisions for you. Now tell me you now tell me that you were acting stupid because you were tired, and you will be the strong or sorry,
You're good.
stupid because
Hans,
you were
Hans is
tired,
such a good friend.
and you will be the strong, assertive Dale I know you to be. So, beginning of 2, Hans kind of gives him the kick in the butt. And
Mm-hmm.
then end of 2, we get that stop and smell the roses, which gets ripped away from us by Nick,
Mm-hmm.
where Cal and
Oh,
Danny are saying after this little war, how about we take a vacation, ignore the adventures unless they get really close, and spend some quality time together. I feel like that is where we're currently at. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
Not to get too much, but social distancing, everything else going on, you can can't let things impact you too much. You got to take time to smell the roses. Get to know what's important and who's important in your life.
Yeah, and there's always going to be challenges, right? The storylines are constantly facing different challenges, and yeah,
I don't know,
it's a great.
the way I see, like, based off the analogy that Pete just gave, the way I see it is like, as a friend, rather than look at or have friends who, do nice things just because it's in the spur of the moment. Like, you want to have those types of friends that do nice things for you over a long period of time, as you do the same for them, and like, they're not doing it just to do uh, like you're at a party and they're like, hey, let me get this food out, but it's more for, I want to eat this food rather than I'm going to help you out. You definitely want those friends that help you out over long periods of time. Keep those people close.
Absolutely, absolutely, and yeah, that little analogy, that quote about those who are important, and the relationship between Cal and Danny, and then book 3, we see that
Or
the sorry, go ahead.
we see it, but with Bob and Cal.
Oh
Is
yeah,
that where
I
you're
was going
going?
to go a different
Oh,
direction
okay.
after he comes back, but yeah, um, yeah, I want to talk about the relationships. They are more throughout book 3, but they're very interesting dynamics, and it's fun to watch the characters grow, especially Cal and Dale. Just the progression, not only of them powering up, but developing into characters. John's been very vocal about his opinion of Dale in the first 2 books, so later I want to get his opinion on
Yep.
where's Dale's at going into book 3. But yeah, intro into book 3. Uh, this is our first time hop, and essentially a good, at least from my point of view as a reader, part of that is because of just where Cal was for that month-ish or so, approximate month of Danny being gone and his decay into madness.
Yeah, I think during that point in time, he ended up, it's like reset. Like, if anyone has ever experienced, not necessarily depression, but just like, man, I really effed up.
Mm,
I need to I need to take a couple steps back and figure out what's going on.
mm-hmm.
Cal essentially did that, except he shut his mind off too. And he's
Mm-hmm.
just like, what is going on? And he just like blanked out. And his dungeon, or
Lost a
like,
part of his soul,
yeah,
right?
like, essentially it's as if, like, you had a best friend, or in this case, like, your significant other just got forcibly taken away from you, and there's nothing you can do about it
Yeah.
at this point for him. And he's just like, what do you do? Like, you're going through the steps of trying to figure out, all right, what is
He,
going on.
yeah, and his aggression in that way makes a lot of sense. Cal, at the beginning of the book, Xenocide comes in and pretty much has that interaction about talking about how he was essentially mad, right? Dungeon madness. Um, and he lost part of his soul, and he just went through all the anger and depression. And even when he does a little bit better, you still see some of that come through until later on when progresses and his mental fortitude builds up a little bit. Uh,
He kind of like snaps back. He's like, wait,
yeah,
what's going on? Okay.
he didn't stay true to his values. And after he comes back, he realizes that he was doing unfair traps. He was sloppy with what he was giving away. In a way, it was nice for the adventurers because they received a lot more rewards, which had an impact on the local economy as everybody was making a lot more money. But yeah, he's not in a good spot at the beginning of book 3. Um, let's see who.
And so that kind of brings us all back to uh, the quotes and getting the butt kicked in the beginning and then
Mm,
enjoying quality of life at the end, keeping people close who have similar values and are going to be able to kick your butt and whatnot and that.
right.
And life goals or life lessons throughout this one for me was, pretty intense because he starts off kind of like John was saying, pretty angry and just, done with the situation, lost himself a little bit. But then you see Minya and Bob kind of give him the kick in the butt and him start to
Mhm,
get his stuff together. And
mm,
then he doesn't give up. He just kind of sets his own goals. And then you see him work through the different steps to progress and get to the eventual point where he achieves his goal. And personally, I go through a lot of similar things where I get overwhelmed with the big picture. I break it up into manageable goals, and then I feel successful about the progression and about what I have achieved. And then, it's just even better when you finally get there. So,
right.
yeah.
He uses it to motivate himself later too, right? And
Yeah.
I think there's a point. It's Bob that is the one that gives him a kick in the pants, and it's like, what would Danny want you to do? Um,
Uh,
yeah, or maybe it was Minya who got that jab in,
yeah.
but
I think it was. I'm pretty sure it was a little bit of both, because
mm,
Bob was the initial person. Like when Cal initially snapped out of it, Bob was already there, so he kind of he was like, "Oh, you're back." He kind of gave him the information that he needed. It's like, how long was I doing that? I was like, "Oh, it's been about a month."
mm,
Yeah.
And so then I didn't think, you'd come back, that kind of thing. And then as you said, like Minya comes back, and it was like, I've been trying to talk to you for like 5 days now. Where have you been?
yeah,
Yeah. And
and he,
gets the memory core, or not memory core, the memory stone that she smashes and really allows him to see everything he's got going on.
Yeah.
he
Well,
was he,
she created her own memories.
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
that he shared with her, but Cal's always trying to work things out logically, and he was still very much in a state of denial at that point because he's like, well, if nobody survived, how do you know? And then
Yeah.
he explains it, but yeah, it's yeah, start off at a pretty low point. Book 3, the relationships there uh, between his mobs, Bob, and the dungeon board Minya. Um, it's interesting to watch, and I felt personally that Bob kind of filled the role of Danny in a way, and he was getting a bit ahead of myself, but he was one of the MVPs for me in book 1. Um,
Or I'm sorry, Bob
or
was
sorry,
MVP
yeah,
3.
book 3. In
Yeah.
book 3,
I was like,
thank you.
wait,
Get tired.
what?
Uh, but yeah,
Yeah, he
who are
kind of
some of your
fills
favorite?
that. Oh,
No, go ahead.
he Bob kind of fills the niche of Danny for
Mhm.
someone to kind of bounce his ideas off and really communicate over different stuff.
Right.
And he also, fills the niche of assisting Cal to grow in knowledge because he
Hmm.
ends up creating different runes and different, or not runes, rituals, and they impact things differently. And
Right.
yeah.
Right. Um, who are some of the other MVPs for you guys in book 3?
Hmm.
um, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but Dale.
Really?
Dale was an MVP for me. Was an MVP for this book, uh, and it all boils down towards the end, because the beginning of the book is just continuation of like, okay,
Hmm.
still doing his normal thing, just
Hmm.
getting in everyone's business and trying to figure
Right.
out just it. I guess I don't know if it was just the tone that what's his name was reading it at, but I think like in terms of for Dale, it just the way he interacted with people just kind of rubbed me the wrong way.
Mm,
But the end of the book, like after he does his thing, he fights for the good
mm,
of humanity, for
mhm.
his town. I enjoy that type of thing. But he did that for the Wailing Wars as well. Couldn't really do a whole lot, but he was there. Um, but at the end of the book, he like really showed up. Even if he wasn't able to do what an A rank mage could do, he still tried his best. I think ultimately, with the end of the book, how it ended up being, he just really was like, okay, now I know what's going on. Now I can figure out like, oh, this character is actually a little bit more has a little bit more guts than I originally thought. Congrats for
He,
him.
you see him progress a bit. Um, he starts thinking of others, and you see that when he sees that people care, he starts to care a little bit more. I feel in book three, his growth for me, I thought it was pretty incredible by book three because thanks to having his meridians open, he essentially sleeps like 3 hours a night. 6 hours is a lot for him, and just his training schedule throughout book three, um, it makes it a lot more believable for me. Right, we've talked about it before, kind of like the believability test with some stuff in sci-fi and fantasy. Like they grow so much, but he's essentially training with Craig on how to control and master his essence on a regular basis. His old party leader, he's training with the dark elf assassins, which that whole interaction is a lot of fun. I think as he goes and um,
Tries to figure out how to
yeah,
train while avoiding getting just murked while
he's
taking a bath or something.
yeah, he starts developing that healthy paranoia that he needs to survive because there were several moments earlier in the series where it's like, come on, Dale, what are you doing? Like, if you're really this important, why are you walking out alone at night?
Yeah.
Of
Well,
course you're going to get mugged.
I,
I mean, you just saw it happen earlier in the book, or a couple days ago, somebody get mugged.
and that's where I kind of have a differing opinion because in one and two and throughout three till the end, I felt it was more like he had to go a mile a minute just to get even or just to keep what he has because he
Mm-hmm.
was a sheep herder. He had nothing to do with cultivation. Remember Frank in book one being like, "Oh, I'm not even going to remember your name. Oh, I don't even care. I got it wrong," because he was
Yeah.
nothing. And the fact that he had to dedicate so much of his time, yeah, he does come off a bit snobbish, and we get to see a bit of the reasoning in three where he's dealing with the nobles and the court and all the people coming in, and he's like, "Hey, I gotta be this way because if I don't, they're gonna walk all over me." And so, yeah, it is a bit much at times, but I feel it's only because he's doing everything, and then you get to see where he's finally feeling content, and then his moon elf instructor kind of kicks his butt and says, "Hey, I'm going to take a more active role with everything."
Yeah. Increase his training,
Yeah,
so on and
yeah,
so forth. And we get to see a little bit through Rose's eyes with the trainer, just how intense he is, right? Because the Dark Elves who live for a long time as cultivator, as fighters, are already on another level.
yeah,
And I think at one point they talk about each um, guard squad is at least a mage level, so that's a B rank, if not having like an A in every party. And this his trainer, um, it's just implied he's on a whole other level. So the fact that he's taking time to work with Dale, no wonder his combat skills increase so much, and no wonder he starts to progress and become this incredible fighter. And he's still keeping up with everything else, right? The city business. Um, at the end of the book, they start an academy there. Just how far Mountaindale has come in book 3.
Yeah.
I do want to interject real quick. The only way he's able to maintain that speed is by crack. By crack, I mean
The crushing
Dungeon
cores.
Cores.
Yeah.
Yes, that was a funny little banter back and forth between Hans, and it makes you think. Dale's argument was you can't be addicted to cultivating, but then when Hans lays it out, which Hans has a bit of a shady background. He's an assassin. He's like, I know a couple drug addicts. Can't get enough. Costs a lot of money.
Makes you want more.
Yeah, it makes you want more.
Like, and then he starts cultivating. He just starts moaning, and it's so funny.
Yeah. Should we talk a bit about Hans? Or I want to hear Peter's MVP, but we did brush on Hans and how epic he is.
Sadly mine would still be Bob. Bob does a lot in developing the rituals, which expands Cal. Bob does a lot, with finding out the correct minerals for transporting certain types of corruption. We get to see him use the Soul Ripper or whatever they call it to take on the necromancers. He ends up being a mage, so he has the biggest progression in my opinion at the end. He kicks Cal's butt in the beginning to make him realize, you want to do these things, you want to fly for Abyss' sake, do it. If I had to not pick the same one, I will say Come Back to Me.
Okay. Bob's really pulls his weight, and he's another one to follow the progression. He starts out barely coherent in the previous book, and Cal explains it through the memory stones, where at one point he was sharing all the memories with all the goblins, but they couldn't handle it, and that's where the one berserker kind of snapped, right?
Yeah.
And then the Bobs, he starts out barely coherent, but he's the only goblin that still gets to keep
the
his
Delta memory stones. Yeah.
Right. So he literally has multiple iterations of himself learning and studying and progressing. And, it's another thing that helped boost Cal up through his discoveries. It's another thing that just returned dividends for Cal to continue his progression up until the B ranks of, in book 3.
I think that was explained before the final battle. There were 60. He was on his 60th generation.
Yeah.
Before he upgraded to mage status.
Yeah.
We keep going back and forth on if we want to include spoilers from other series that we've talked about. But last week we did the Bobiverse, and Pete and I were talking about it before we went on, that there are so many similarities there. The fact that, at least in my opinion, Bob in this book and Bob in the Bobiverse, just a lot of interesting parallels of just different copies and
wondering
studying.
if that was a inspiration point for Dennis.
You see a lot of little nods and Easter eggs throughout Dakota Kraut books and other books. Makes you wonder if it's a nod to Dennis E. Taylor for the Bobiverse. Hey,
I like your books.
Yeah, exactly.
I put my own Bob in my books.
Yep. Dakota Kraut's not afraid to break the fourth wall on a regular basis or insert puns. So maybe, who knows? Danny, do you still need another moment on MVP, Pete?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I'll say Danny is with the Master and the Necromancers in book 3. And we finally get to see the Necromancer story arc really start to pick up steam. And through that interaction with Danny, where they take what is it, like one of the master's followers and sacrifice him to make him a new dungeon core. And you finally see what they've been working up to and why they need Danny. They want Danny to bond with this new dungeon, and they just start pumping him up and just feeding him sacrifice after sacrifice to where at least what it's been implied through the lore, Cal is one of the fastest growing dungeons that Danny's aware of, and this guy is pretty much just boosted through the ranks. And it's interesting. We finally get a lot of the questions answered about the necromancers, and through conversation and dialogue with some of the other characters, learn more about the history there. Excuse me.
I'm trying to think, who is it? It's Amber? Or is it... No, it's Chandra.
Mm-hmm.
Chandra knew the master before he became the master, and
it was Chandra.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we get a little bit of insight into the master from Danny's point of view, but then kind of like we were talking earlier, having a good friend that keeps you on track. Apparently Chandra was supposed to be the one who killed him. She thinks it's a copycat, but then we get more of the backstory. I enjoy the little back and forth where Chandra and Frank are like, wait a minute, that's a giant leap. That's like saying a kid lost his sweets and now we're, having a war or something. And
yeah.
Or I think it was like a kid lost his sucker or something like that, and then all of a sudden the country just got destroyed. Like, how does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a giant leap.
Be right back.
And so, we get to see a bit more of the necromancers in that light. And that's where I said earlier I was disappointed we didn't get to see as much of Danny. And I really enjoyed in book 2 how she played a critical, fighting role for Cal. And she plays a strong role here where we're getting insight into the master and the necromancers, and instead of just a little blurb at the beginning or when they attack, there's a lot more to it. So that was kind of exciting.
I feel like they could have, like, the only main bad guy that we really got to know about was the master. I feel as though this battle could have been so much more epic if we knew more about the bad guys, aka the necromancers, because we really, as they explained the final battle, it was just like they separated all of the necromancers by rank, what rank they were, so like A, B, C, that kind of thing.
Yeah, they kind of hint at foreshadowing a bit, because I guess my progression, or the way I think of it, is you get Tom, who has his outburst to the Amazonian queendom, and then you get a little bit of backstory about them, and then you get a little bit more when Cal's love bugs have swarmed over the city, and that's why they're here. And then you get a little bit more for Chandra, and then it's, you don't actually follow them. It's all like second hand, third hand, and then you get insight into the whole necromantic war was because of the master, was because of the Amazonians, was, apparently Chandra is known as the Dark Valkyrie, and they have that whole back and forth. So it's very third person-esque, where you don't get any direct input about them, and I would have liked more, and I will not say, never mind.
At this point, Dakota Kraut has started partnering with other writers to expand the Divine Dungeon universe. So I really wonder if we get to see some of these other characters, especially if it takes place at different points in the timeline, because you do get some of these big name title drops that you see through other fantasy and other even just like MMOs, where all of a sudden, like, achievement unlocked, Dark Valkyrie, or just all the Adam, has all the different clerics titles named, where it's like, oh, it's not just Father Richard, it's, I forget.
Father Richard, Demon Bane, something.
yeah, insert, it's almost like we're back in Game of Thrones where the list off Daenerys Targaryen's titles, and her whole Starbucks cup is covered in ink with all that stuff. Just go by Danny.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so we talked a little bit about Mountain Dale's council. They really seem to get things going and moving for Mountain Dale to where it progresses into more of, no longer a campsite to more of a city where all these dignitaries show up, right? At one point early on in the book, I think, did you guys already cover this with the Amazon Kingdom and the Dwarven delegation
briefly.
and
he was saying
elves? Oh, go ahead.
He was saying that he wished he got to see more of the necromancers. They were just kind of divided up into A and B, rankings and whatever. And I mentioned there's a lot of third person perspective from Tom talking about the Amazonians talking about the love bugs that Cal created, and a lot of like third person stuff. Yeah.
Well, we did get to see them in that dungeon crawl later, right, with the necromancers when they came in and tried to attack Mountain Dale.
Yeah, we got to see a little bit of it.
Not a whole lot. You're right, though.
Yeah, it's not backstory for character or no character development. It's just kind of like, hey, these are who and where.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the council.
Yes, the council. We got to see them some through council business interactions, but not as much. Tyler has really come a long way. Our one cultivator. Yeah. Going and making deals with Dale and his party to collect stuff, try new things. I really enjoyed the back and forth banter with Tyler and Hans about don't be shocked or laugh, but we have a scientist working for us.
Oh yeah.
And trying to prove and disprove gravity. It's a fun little back and forth.
But also it's kind of cool that we get to see the quests that they have to do or whatnot. The council pretty much comes together and says, hey, people need to attack the third floor for the goblins after the phantom armor situation. People didn't feel good about fighting on that floor, and it wasn't, we didn't get to see the council meeting, but they were the ones who made the quest or made, hey, people need to address this. So it was good to see it all coming together.
Yeah, and just kind of hinting that there's stuff working in the background, that the city is developing. And
then
go ahead.
We also get that nod at the end where they're already at each other's throats right after Dale dies, and he's like, ahem. Then Father Richard's like, and someone needs to get that cough looked at. And then we get the little nod back to book 1. Yeah, book 1, 2, 1. Anyway, James is like, I don't believe you. And he's like, get off my mountain.
Yeah.
So you can see, I can like physically see just like the small like smile, just like he just goes from like straight like deadpan to just a really like just like, oh, all right. It's like let me take care of that for you. Get off my mountain.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, a lot more snippets than actual big things.
I agree with that.
And I guess we get a lot more character development for the council members, but not in a council setting. Like you were saying, Chandra, we get the backstory of the necromancers and the master. Frank, he's not a main character, but does die and doesn't have main character immunity. So
yeah. I don't know. I always pictured Frank as the Master Roshi kind of deal.
Okay.
I don't know why, but I picture him some old man. He still had some fight left in it. Like he knew what he was doing, and then like while he fought, he had like a couple moves, and then he just died. And I was like, oh, okay. Guess he wasn't that tight. I guess he was a Yamcha. All right.
Whoa. And he kept kind of punching above his weight, because
Mhm.
when you get that instance with Dale going, so necromancers come in, Dale's like, how do I let everybody know? Breaks into the chapel, gets with Father Richard. Father Richard's like, you should probably just go hide, let me show you
Right.
my power, this, that, and the other. And we get to see a little bit of
Well,
Frank.
I was gonna say real quick, like Dale went to Father Richard and was like panicking, like what, like this is happening. What do I need to do to make sure, like I can fight? And
Mhm.
Father Richard's like, no, no,
No.
no, you need to go hide, find whoever you can, go hide. Let me tell you what this, like this is what you're going up against, and then he does
Right.
his thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Which
Right.
also is a convenient, subtle segue into how Cal has developed a zone that people can create stuff in that whole segment. And I wish I saw
Mhm.
more, besides the point. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. And then you get to see a little bit of Frank dealing with the necromancers there, where it's like he's not strong enough to have his law fully impact him, but it's enough of a
Mm.
hiccup to allow other people to be successful. So he's kind of pulling a Dale and fighting above his weight.
Mhm. And I felt in this book they do a good job to kind of explain the difference between like power level, if we're staying with the same reference, and experience, right? Like Frank is clearly an experienced fighter. He's leader of this branch of the
Guild.
Adventurers Guild.
Yeah.
And then you also see it kind of with Cal and the other dungeon there, where Cal was constantly working to improve himself versus the other dungeon. Power level's one thing, but ability and skill is another thing.
Yeah,
Um,
and needing to have that balancing factor, short life
mhm,
lesson, you know,
mhm.
you can't do it all. You need to find that other half.
Yes, yes.
What rank did they say that the other dungeon was at? The
He
one he was
made
fighting up
it
against?
to mage because I remember Bob slamming totems down and Cal being like, "Oh, well, he must be at least in the mage rank because otherwise this would have shattered his core." Because he starts fighting with mana.
I
He made it
I
at least mage.
I thought it was implied he was stronger and closer to the A ranks. Again, if somebody
Well,
knows,
yeah.
please
B's
throw it in the
considered
comments
mage.
below. Um, but yeah,
I feel as though the Infernal dungeon just focused on like power, I think a little bit too much, and didn't learn the interest, if I could say the word correctly, intricacies, um,
yes,
about like just how things worked, and just like the small, it's the small things. Like
yeah,
I feel like the Infernal dungeon just focused like I can I can lift this boulder, and like so can I, but I can lift it with less effort, that
right.
kind of thing.
Yeah, and that
You,
goes back to what I was saying for having someone to balance you out. Like he didn't have a wisp, and they tried to take Danny to balance him out. Plus, the guiding factor was the master, and we get to see
Mhm.
where the dungeon creates people, and the necromancers control the create dungeon created mobs.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he was just force fed. He
yeah.
wasn't forced to learn and adapt. And the other thing that kind of throws the difference is also what tier of a mage you are. Right, where Cal, thanks to the Silverwood tree, was able to ascend to the
Yeah,
highest
yeah.
tier. Where if you bonded with the lower law, um,
your
it
law only affects people up to that point.
yeah, something like that. The higher level you are, the more advanced your mana is, and so on and so forth. So I
So
really enjoy the magic system in this series a lot.
yeah,
What was the grade? What was the not the grade, but like the what was the type of mana that he was going for? I forget. he was going for flight. I know that's what he wanted, but he ended
Was
up
it
getting something else.
Quintessence?
Or yeah, his Acme or his thing is everything. It
Mm,
is the essence that became essence. He's quintessence. But
yeah,
due to his knowledge, he's only able to access and utilize certain aspects.
right. And the further he understands his law, the more he progresses and ascends to that spiritual level. Right now
Yeah,
he's just dealing with the byproduct of mana. And yeah, I really enjoy that part when he ascends through the to the B ranks.
Yeah,
uh,
I think he did a great explanation of like how that worked out,
mm,
and essentially like how he was going up the tiers like a tower essentially.
right.
Uh, he I enjoyed like having the voices talk to him each step, each phase.
Mm-hmm.
It was really interesting to go through.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then it only appeared that he only was gone for about a week.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And
It
that's
was supposed to be a
where
20-minute journey though, right?
Yeah.
yeah, 20-minute adventure.
Yep.
And that's where this book and our other ones we always talk about enjoying being able to accelerate time. And
Mm,
for the Baba verse, he's able to change his time sense. And for some of our
mm-hmm.
other ones, are able to change their time sense. And this one, it's not as direct, kind of like how Bob has several iterations of himself. So it's not really
Right.
faster, it's just multiplied. And then, the ascension, how Cal has the time sense of the soul. It makes it longer.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. So out of Dale's party, who are your favorite party members between Rose, Hans, Tom, and Adam? Ready, Peter.
So if I had to switch my favorite person, sidestep, Hans would have to be up there because
Okay.
his comedic relief, his subtle outlooks, his ability to bounce back after whatever, he does a
Mm-hmm.
lot for our party.
Mm-hmm.
And that scene where, oh man, I'm trying to recreate it in my head real quick. I essentially, okay, yeah. They walk in and the floor has a full ecosystem, and he's saying like, "Oh no!" And then Adam is like, "Wait, all this is about bird poop?" And Rose just kind of like, "You're such a child. Go fight a cat.
Uh,
Let me get you started." Shoots a cat, and then Hans is like, "I like cats. You know how many words have meow in them?" And he goes through meow, meowing, blah blah blah, and then he's like, "Homeowner," and I'm like, "Wait, what?" And then you
right.
get to I don't want to kill cats, right? Meow. Yeah,
Yes.
so he does a lot, and then like after that whole thing happens, he's like, "What? It's not my job to kill everything for you. Think of this as a test. You didn't do so well." So he keeps everyone moving with a lot of comedic relief.
He does a good job as a party leader too. And again, thinking to
Or he's not party leader.
or not party leader, but mentor,
he
right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
the
he might
highest
have
level guy.
almost kind of like it's just
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
like between Carl and I, it's just like Carl will have me make the decision, but he's going to give me all the different options that I can choose from. So
Yeah.
he kind of does the same thing with Dale.
Yeah, helping him keep it in perspective.
Yeah, it's like yeah,
Hans every so often pulls, an OP moment where he steps in or kind of exerts his authority. And we see that when they talk about going down to the new level, right after it opens up in book 3, it's like, well, let's wait for a field report. We barely survived this one. Um, but yeah, he also doesn't overdo it all the time, where he wants them to work for it. He wants them to learn, and he's constantly working to mentor them in their own ways, especially with Tom. He
Yeah.
really works to bring Tom up, um, and just kind of build up his cultivation with fire and with the guild and everything, and so on and so forth.
But
So
also that he, in that instance, for Hans directing Tom, he's a realist. You know, like he realizes that he hasn't been as strict with Tom as he should be, and Tom
mhm,
has a lot of additional corruption, is having trouble advancing, and so he sees it, realizes it, and then he addresses it. He's like, "Hey, use this wasteful move that you'll lose a little bit of ranking, but you'll get rid of your corruption." So self-reflection is something hard to write in or
and it's
hard
for
for
the
people
long
to do.
game, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, you lose a bit of cultivation, but if you have too much corruption in your center, you won't be able to ascend to the higher levels.
Stop touching your face, John.
I'm sorry.
Uh,
It's just me here, so I can do it. So
I just
also
um,
my eye itches. So
okay.
good old seasonal allergies. John, who is your favorite party member
my favorite.
of Dale's? Rose, Hans, Tom, or Adam?
It's a difficult selection. I really let me start off with the opposite, saying that the people that I haven't really seen a whole lot from is Adam and Rose. Adam being the bottom tier because I haven't really seen a whole lot
He
from.
doesn't have a big role in this book. He's there as the healer.
It's more his power.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like he has his moments, but that's about it. Rose has a little bit more, but I still want to see more character development for her. Just because there's so much I just don't know about her. And then on top of that, what she provides for the party is just archery, and I feel like plus a little bit more, but she also kind of helps with Hans in terms of comedic relief.
I was gonna say that's her main role, is to balance out the snarky of Hans for the serious of Rose.
Yes, she definitely balances him out and pulls him back in from time to time. Carry on, John.
Then we have, who was the other? It was Tom, Hans, and who?
Adam, Tom, Hans, Rose, and Dale.
Oh, Dale.
45.
We talked not about Dale. We're not going to talk about Dale. Dale's we don't care about him.
Yeah.
So between Tom and Hans, I don't know, like the type of characters that I really enjoy are usually the anti-heroes, and Hans kind of fits that role a little bit for me. So I would have to say, in terms of like favorite between the party members, he fits that. He's just going to have to be that person for me. Tom really does have a little bit more respect for me. I don't really like the way he talks, but that's just how
he's a barbarian.
He's a barbarian, so gotta make do.
He's.
But again, with Tom, there's so much more we can find out about him. I think we already know, like a little bit about his past with the Queendom, and just like all of his family members or his brethren are.
Let's
like it's the what is it? The memory stones. They all get different memory stones.
I was about to say, let's not brush past that because it really adds some depth to his character. You talk about like your point of view and like relative experience and in your life. And Tom, I think it was like 50 of his siblings, they basically get all their childhoods, right? They start off with the happiest memories of his brother, who was the child of his father and the Amazonian queen or princess.
I don't remember it being that. I could have swore, because his father had a bunch of different wives.
Right. But the first one or whatnot, at least the main one was, I'm pretty sure, the Amazonian. And then they got killed, and then everyone after that kind of has to learn, and they experience that one pleasant childhood, and then they got to train. I forget the quote. It's a really good one where it's something about like Oh, pretty much like they want you to, like, failure is allowed, but they want you to keep trying, right, and strive to do better and
Yeah.
progress.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but,
So, and there are so many snippets or like tiny little flavorings for Tom because, like,
mhm,
through one, when we first get introduced to him into the party, we know he's a
mm,
noble or whatever, and the epic lead up to my name is Tom.
yeah,
And then second one, I think we get a little more flavor of Noble, but then in the third one, he's actually like being involved with the council meetings, and we get a little
mm,
more backstory about the memory stones and how he's got like 50 childhoods in his head. And then we
Yeah.
also get more of the fact that everything was stripped from him and he was only left with his combat prowess.
mhm.
And so, yet again, it's just such a subtle snippet that
You want
there's so
more.
much more that we want.
I thought they took away more than that. I thought they took, like, he still had.
Well, he
I thought they
lost all
took.
his
I
inheritance and stuff,
Yeah, I would say I could have sworn he lost everything,
pretty much.
including like memories, like status, like he lost everything.
Yeah,
So he
yeah,
has to rebuild. Like, of course, he's already strong,
Right.
but his like mage, like if he was an A rank, and all of a sudden like the knowledge that he had just brought him down to a D rank
Mhm,
mage or
mhm.
D rank cultivator.
yeah,
I like it's just building up from there and starting
Yeah,
over again.
yeah.
yeah. Wish we saw
They're
more.
Oh, good.
oh, I was just going to say Tom's royalty, but we get to deal with a lot of royalty in book 3 and find
Oh
out
yeah,
just like how this little sheep herder village has turned into um,
a
all the
flying
major
fortress.
world factions. Yeah, a flying fortress with the portal from the Portals Guild on there, bringing all these noblemen to the academy, and you have Tom, the barbarian prince. You have the dwarven princes there, the dark elf um, royalty there, and
The
then
high elf.
the high elves come in, the Amazons come in. We have all these big name people, all these big players, and then yeah, the Phoenix and the Lion Kingdom, where Dale is a baron to them, but then by the end, Dale, who is Cal, they're now his dungeonborn, right?
Yeah,
So talk about
what a twist.
interesting. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What a twist. How that messes with the hierarchies, right? Um, but it's interesting, and we see a lot in this book how much Dale's nobility helps him out here, right? Thanks to the memory stone, thanks to his certain immunity granted him by that, and then just, gosh, the dark elves. Um, we get to see how much they get out of the deal with Dale and how crucial they are to his success, along with everyone else. Um, I really enjoy that story arc there with the elves and seeing that interaction with the snobby high elves.
Oh yeah, when all the delegations arrive at once and he's got to
Hmm.
deal with them.
Hmm. It's just
And
like, go ahead.
we had again like for the dwarves, there's a comment where it's like, "Oh, I miss Evan. He would really enjoy this, and he's on vacation." But to fill in the role of dwarf, we get the people coming over trying to create a trade agreement. We get the people who built our walls and then build our academy, and
Right,
yeah, we get the back and forth there.
right. Um, yeah, it's interesting seeing kind of the larger world at play there, bouncing between Cal and Dale, and everything leading up to the climax at the end. Um, we also get to see some other big characters from the world. We talked a little bit about Kirill Nelson, the S-ranked High Inquisitor, mentor to Father Richard, and the son of
Xenocide.
Xenocide. Yeah, we see him come through the portal It was right around the time that the Necromancers attacked Mountaindale and kind of wreak havoc. Um, and then just Xenocide, like his power level is incredible.
Yeah, he has a couple unique moments. Like he brings Cal back from his madness. Stop stealing my whispers, you dungeon. And then we get to see a little bit of his, unhingedness, where he just straight up runs through the wall until he reaches open air, and then he's like, "Wee!" We get to see him instantly notify or recognize the necromancers as soon as he gets through the portal. And then we also get to see him save a big portion of Mountaindale, and everyone's like, "Oh, whoa, what epic weapon is that? What just killed 3 A rank or 3 whatever necromancers? What did this?" And he's just like, now I have blood on my toothbrush." And he just like throws it aside, and it's just like, what?
He is clearly
on a different level.
Yeah, just on a completely different level that we don't even fathom at this point in the book. What'd you think about his conflict with his son, Kier Nolson? I think it was pretty much like what decades that he spent hunting him down, and his mana, trying to think of the word here, pretty much the law that he bound to allows him to pass judgment, right? And
John sees everything in black and white.
And Xenocide kind of talks about the gray a little bit, but even Adam, who is just a huge fan of him, is like, we got to get away. And John talked a little bit about how he enjoys the anti-hero. You really get to see, I forget how they worded it. Was it like the guilt or the how did Adam word it? Where basically the more black you saw was the
how guilty you are.
Yeah.
It's
so sorry, go ahead.
His power lets everyone see your sins. Not all of us have had a great past or are as good as we are now. He has to act out or do, justice. And then you get that whole scene with Xenocide where he's like, "Oh, am I not guilty because I have no remorse? Or am I not guilty because I had to do it? Anyway, you should come over sometime. I have this great recipe for puppy or something."
Right.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Just showing his madness, but it's an interesting perspective. The law that he binds himself to, even though he wants to pass judgment on his father, he's not able to because he is completely white, free of guilt or sin, or however that law is formed up. But it's an interesting perspective.
Going back on that though, you know who was completely pitch black?
Hans, except for his core.
Black. Yeah.
We've had some hints to his past, and he opened up a little bit about being an assassin, right? So
yeah, we get to see a little bit in book 1 when he takes Dale to the pleasure house and explains why he knows so much about the city. And then I'm trying to think of a key point for 2. I don't know. Anyway, and then we get to see more of it in 3. And when he says, "Oh, if you couldn't figure out a simple repeating whatever when they're going through the fire, then how can you call yourself assassins? Oh, adventurers." And he has a little slip up there.
Yeah, he still very much sees himself as an assassin, but who knows? Maybe he's turning over a new leaf. He's another character that I would enjoy having a side story for, or a side quest, just kind of hearing his history leading into the Divine Dungeon series. Couple other interesting characters before we lead into the final climax. I really enjoyed the Lightning Mages story arc there, and all their electricity puns. And for me, I think it was one of the first scenes that you get to see just truly the difference in their power levels. They drag Dale along, and I think at that point he gets further in the dungeon than they ever had, and are is it the second team to defeat Manny, who is the new
Yeah, technically.
monster? Yeah. So you just get to see the difference in mage level abilities, and when they finally have to start applying themselves towards the end level.
And
As far as
sorry, side note, we talked about an A ranker is worth 10 Bs, but that's still just like a base overarching line. And then you've got the tiers, which, depending on how high of a tier, changes your multiplier factor for being able to do different stuff. And then head to head, manotype versus manotype, certain ones cancel other ones out, and so on and so forth. So that was just a brief overview. And then, yeah, like you were saying, when they get to the 6th floor and they're doing part of the Tower of Ascension, like, they have to stop and they realize,
Excuse me.
and that is just like a subtle hint at it's all that touching of your face. Subtle hint to I am really trying hard not to touch mine, and my thing is I keep running my hand through my beard, and I need to stop doing that. But yeah, anyway, they get to the 6th tier and they get to see measuring out the different lengths are for how you get a certain mana type or a certain power. And yeah, we just get a snippet or a hint into what possibly could be and how people are going to fight over it. Another thing that I enjoyed and or kind of irked me is we don't get the necromancers at the very beginning. We get another party going through Cal while he's mad, and I wish we got to see more other parties, because like in 1 we get to see a little bit of Tom's party go through, only because we're going to introduce Tom later. 2, we got to see a couple others in regards to the war that happened with all the infected, and we get to see people fighting, but we don't get to see another party go through the dungeon step by step. And I get it, they're not crucial, but
it helps give you perspective.
Yeah, other people.
Well, like when introducing new like mobs and stuff, they introduced quite a few mobs, so they wanted I feel like he was trying to describe to the reader without like potentially losing like the main
character. Yeah, I guess that's true for like Phantom Armor and
randos going through your dungeon. Like, this is how strong they normally would be, and then like completely decimate them. Like, this is how powerful they are. I feel as though they should have at least done one group trying to go down into, or at least describing the mana core. But I guess
there's 2.
He kind of did that with the electricity people.
Yeah, we get
and then he kind of explained how dangerous he was with the. It's like, like 70-ish people have tried, only 1 has succeeded. Everyone else has died.
Yeah.
That's kind of fun. Brings you back to more like the MMO feel, right? A little counter on boss completions.
Yeah.
Or like arcades or something.
Yeah, we can't do the ending climax justice with really talking about just how much Cal has scaled up, right? Very beginning of the book, experiencing some madness, like really struggling to keep it together. But by working with Bob and Minya, he's able to get what he needs to ascend into the B ranks and kind of get that mental fortitude. And even Minya kind of points that out, like, hey, you seem a lot better than you used to be. But just like the first 2 books, he progresses so much. We talked about the 6th level and how I think fishies and D rankers can handle the first 2 levels, right? But then you have these where they B and A rank that struggle with, or they're all B rank who struggle on his final level at the end of the book.
I don't
Just
remember the rankings, but yeah, they're at least mages, so B or A.
mm-hmm,
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
B would definitely struggle depending on how many B mages you had. A's should be fine on the
Okay.
5th level.
Or
Sixth level would be different.
oh yeah, and then it comes back to full circle, the application of power.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Um,
So
and then
Cal, oh, sorry, I was trying to
go
get
ahead.
you back on track. So Cal's really progressed throughout the storyline, or throughout this book.
Yeah, him and the Bobs built all their toys, tinkering in the background in their mad lab, building all these different rituals. Peter, you call John out. Stop playing with your beard, man.
I know. Trying to keep. Anyway,
I do it too. So yeah, and then we get to the
flying.
climax where all of a sudden he takes off and they're flying, and I really enjoyed Dale, where he's like, "Oh, just when I thought everything was getting good, you're going to lift us up and then drop us, right?
Yep.
It's been a fun ride." And he just like lays down on the bed, like, "Okay, too good to be true. Just end it now."
Yep.
Right after they get the academy, right after everything seems to be working, and he starts to make deals with the dungeon, like, "Hey, let's better ourselves." But yeah, he takes off, and then all of a sudden, the cards start falling. Right, you start having these exiles coming to Mountaindale, where the prince, now king, and the princess, now queen of the Phoenix and Lion Kingdom, show up. Where last book, good chunk of their population got wiped out because of the Wailing War, and now all of the nobility, and it really puts into perspective how strong the master truly is if he's able to just walk in with a bag of heads and eliminate the entire nobility, because they really talk through how strong and powerful the nobles of these nations are.
Yeah, they're
And
supposed to
he's
be
just,
top
yeah,
ranking individuals of their area.
yeah, exactly. Like, talk about power levels on a whole other level.
It's like introducing Majin Buu in the Frieza saga. You're like,
Yes.
oh, I can't even do anything.
Exactly. Just but a fly. So
then we go into our hyperbolic time chamber. They make a deal with Cal, and they get buffed up.
Yep, they're like, hey,
get buffed up.
We need 18 years worth of time. So that's 18 days.
But it's interesting looking at the bigger picture of how much of the world's problems are caused by Cal and how much Cal comes in to save the day, right?
Yeah.
Because the kingdoms wouldn't be in the position that they're in without the Wailing War and the parasitic mushroom that got out there. Like, the Mountaindale wouldn't be prospering so much if it wasn't the final place for everybody to retreat to. And then Cal's ready to go. Bob just ascended into the mage ranks himself, and he has this like standing army of over 2,000 goblins ready to go. Weren't the guys just like clearing them out a couple months ago, as he's stockpiling them in the back anyway? And
yeah, Cal gets his little nod where he's like, just remember, I'm not the one who should have been prepared for this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He's like, I ain't trying to do that Wailing War again.
Yeah.
Trying to create people on the fly.
Yeah. And then he goes and he gets 2 new Dungeonborns, right? Queen Marie and King Henry, where they're essentially coated in mithril, and they're a foot taller than all their peers, and have this incredible they get buffed pretty hardcore, right? Yeah. Cal puts a lot of essence and mana and energy into making them ready.
Top tier.
Yeah, ready to duke it out. And hats off. Dakota Kraut writes good combat, and for me, with these type of stories, that's important. And when we get to the battle with the necromancers at the end in the Amazonian kingdom, yeah, what a climax.
Yes, and that's where we finally, like all of our other council members, we get to see them fight, except for the mage, or except for the portal mages. And this time we get a little snippet of them fighting. I was a little disappointed, but at the same time, it was, worth something. It did
yeah.
soften them up, but,
Yes.
like, it's not Father Richard level where he's,
Yes.
obliterating all the necromancers as they're there. They did take out a Toon Lord, which we get a little bit of backstory there,
Mm-hmm.
but, I wish we got to see potential for them fighting, or if the only thing they can do is support.
Like,
Yeah.
hey, I can create a portal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, that's essential for wars. Like, think about resources and logistics, being able to portal. But yeah, it's
Hey, magic existed, yeah.
it's interesting. Just the scaling, it makes you wonder how big the combat's going to get in the later books, right?
Yeah, we definitely like this is definitely not going to be the last like major fight that's going to happen, because obviously the main bad guys like the master isn't even there. And so we're fighting up against, it's like to comparison, what second book of Lord of the Rings, Isengard releases all of its troops to go towards Rohan, and leaves his tower pretty much defenseless against the Ents. And this is essentially what we're seeing here. I feel as though like they just happen to coincide with the moment. Like there's no one really to defend the place here. We can attack them right now.
Well, it always seems to scale because book one, it was literally a group of 5, a party up against a distortion cat. Book two, it was Mountaindale versus Horde of Infected. And now, book three, it's all of Mountaindale versus all of, or well, not all, but a big group of necromancers and everything else going on.
And demons and undead.
It's a lot of fun to see them finally unite, right? A lot of the earlier books is Cal and Dale pitted against each other, kind of this almost like an arms race. And then here, there's a conflict greater than them. So they're teaming up, and you have the goblins working with the humans, working with just everyone, the Adventurers Guild, to fight and try to put an end to the necromancers. And then we have Dale, our little addict with the cores.
D rank addict.
Yeah. He has to go and mess stuff up, right?
Yeah. And so
I mean,
that little
I feel as though his power is like maybe low rank C right now, but he's qualified as a D rank.
Yeah, they briefly touch on that, kind of like when he breaks into the chapel and they're like, "Hey, so you've been beating people above your ranking that you probably shouldn't have."
Right. Don't get too overconfident. You can only punch above your weight class so much before it doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, he was consistent. As a true addict, he only like the only things I really saw him do was break cores to gain essence, and then at the same time he had like a diet of like health potions.
Yeah.
That was essentially what he was doing.
At one point, when the cleric heals him with, I think, when the necromancers attack, he's like, "Wow, you're worse than the last guy." And he's like, "Oh, thanks. I feel better than I have in months." Because he is pushing himself so hard, constantly training, constantly fighting, constantly doing what he can. And there's a lot of concern for him from the different mentors in his life, Craig and Hans, and everybody's really trying to get him to
take a break.
Take it easy. Yeah. And then, the Chaos Portal crushes a core, correct me if I'm wrong, of like celestial energy, and he had some problems because it was also mana absorbing it. So like his whole cultivation system starts shutting down, right? So he throws himself through the portal.
Yeah.
They essentially realized that, like, like for his hand, like all different channels that he had, they were essentially falling apart, meaning that he was no longer going to be able to gain access to essence, aka he was dying.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And Dakota did a good job kind of emphasizing it earlier, where you see Rose use her binding of chaos, where it's celestial and infernal, to bind the shade or whatever that's coming after him. And then the necromancers are using infernal, and Dale crushes a core involving celestial. But then the fact that the core contained mana, and mana went through his meridians, and now they're all collapsing, and he's not going to be able to do it. But, then like John was saying, a nod to Dale, even with all hope lost, he's still giving it his all, and he's still, goes through the portal and follows them. And then you get the paradoxical WTF, where he's seeing his own creation, and it's just,
You talk about the time loop.
How Cal is holding the portal open, and on the other side of the portal seeing himself, but the other side of the portal is moving quicker. And he's seeing his birth, because he's like, wait a minute, it is too good of a day to die. And
he's like, wait, that sounds familiar.
Yes.
My favorite part for that, though, was when his group came in, like, after the fact to try and save him, and Tom like stumbles like forward, like face plants the ground, and then everyone follows him and like lands on him. That was hilarious.
Yeah, getting that little visual there.
And then he, gets up. It's like, Dale, where are you? Like yelling out. It's like, shut up. I want to announce our position here.
And then, the coup de grace, or the only way any of this actually works, is because Cal, and his ever exceeding quest to make Dale viable, still has his gauntlets on him, which is able to crush the infernal dungeon. Because otherwise he wouldn't have had the power to do jack. But, because Cal was looking ahead / protecting himself, and the paradox of all that.
Yeah, Cal's definitely about his own self-interest. Even when he decides to revive Dale, it's because he doesn't want competition with himself, right?
Yeah.
There's some other motivation there, and he does grow and develop, but he's still a narcissist. So
and so what a twist over Dale dying. Main character dies, story's over. Just kidding. Main characters actually are two main characters. Then
split in half.
Yeah, split in half. And then also the how wisps are made. So Dale crushes the infernal core, gets a bit of essence to rush to Dani. She's now got more power to escape through the portal, and she's, proclaiming her love to Cal, and Cal's like, I love you too. And then the tree's like, little
mistletoe. All right.
Yeah, a little mistletoe moment, and it's like
little pollination.
Did we just have a kid?
It's funny because it's like they were doing the thing, and it's like starts going, like, I don't know what's going on. Ding! Oh, is that a kid?
Yeah.
Named it Grace.
Yep. It was a beautiful moment after them being apart so much, and just I don't know, just the innocence and the joy and the fun of it all, and all the feels. It's nice. We end in a better spot in book 3 than we did in book 2, in my humble opinion.
Yes. Yeah, or book 1.
or in book 1. Yeah. He tied up a lot of these different story arcs, but there's still not complete resolution, right?
Yeah, still not completely resolved. And then we also, kind of what I said earlier, get to see how the council would deal if, uh, oh my god, brain fart.
The council
Dale.
deal
Dale,
without
yeah,
Dale.
without Dale there. That all. Alrighty.
He really holds it all together.
Yeah.
So
We feel good about book 3.
I feel pretty good about book 3. I think we hit all the major story arcs, likes, dislikes. I know for myself, out of all 3, this one's probably my favorite so far.
Well, this is a culmination. Like, this isn't the final book, but this is like the culmination. We finally understand who Cal / Dale is, and it's just like I feel as though we can now start like not necessarily a brand new series, but like a brand new story arc.
Yes.
Like, everything from here on is just like brand new. So it's just like you finally read. It's like reading like you watch Dragon Ball, and now you can move on to Dragon Ball Z. So
yes, the prequel or whatnot is out of the way. Time to get to the real story now that we've completed the little time.
And the same paradox, due to the climax of Dale being Cal and Cal being Dale, it just adds that replay or re-listen value for me, because now when I go back through them, I tried not to spoil it while we were doing the other ones, but you see certain tendencies that hint, because kind of like, I think in this one they do it before where they're like, maybe I was a whiny little brat, when Bob's having the conversation about ascending and the tough love with Cal, and then they joke, it's like, oh, maybe I was a whiny brat in my previous life, and you see little nods and things to it.
Yeah. There are some series that the read value is definitely there, especially with these big twists. This is a series that was definitely like that for me. Mistborn was another one like that. Curious to hear what the audience thinks as far as like good series to go back and revisit and get new things from it. So just toss that in the comments below when you have a moment. Yeah. Final thoughts, guys?
Read it.
Like,
one of my favorite lit RPGs. It's really good.
And this is still just like icing on the cake. You haven't even gotten to the cake portion.
I've read further in the series with Dakota Kraut and even some of his other series. I'm a big fan of the Completion Chronicles, and this is early in his career as a writer. A lot of those little quirks, he gets a lot better. It's just good stuff if it's your flavor.
Yeah. Yep.
So yeah, where are we at? Pete?
We are at wrapping up. Sunday. Every given Sunday. Taking back Sunday. If you haven't been listening, tune in Sunday. So essentially,
you could say Sunday.
Yeah. We're planning on Sunday. For the foreseeable future, life pending. Sunday will be our live streams, shooting for starting at the same time, 8 p.m. Eastern. Next book on the list is Scythe. We will be adding in some new guest characters. Yeah.
Yeah, Scythe by Neil Schusterman. Let me pull up some details to let you guys know, but we do have the spoiler-free book review of that up. I'll make sure to include that in a link in the descriptions below. But next Sunday, you got a week of time to check it out.
It is a shorter book, so it should be easier to pick up and people have time to go along. We
Yes.
did try some new editing techniques / composition ideas.
Constantly trying to break stuff.
Yeah,
and keep
constantly
on
trying to
playing,
break
right?
stuff. I feel we dedicated a little more time to certain aspects after the fact. Should have done more to other aspects. Good
Mhm.
enough. Creating content, doing stuff. So let us know how that went, how this went.
Feedback always appreciated.
Yeah. Let us know.
Geek Out number 16, Scythe, Arc of Scythe, book 1 by Neil Schusterman. And we're aiming for, Sunday, April 5th. Hope you guys will join us. Thanks for everyone who tuned into the live stream. Thanks,
Stay
John,
safe.
for joining us.
Oh, no problem.
And yeah.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.